Well, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to chat with you. Let me start by saying that this is not a statement about Obamacare or universal health care. There's not an editorial on that. However, you may make a different decision at the end of the presentation, depending on where critics of universal health care say it's going to go, as to whether this may be applicable or not. To be able to set up the stage just a little bit, let me explain what CrowdMed is. CrowdMed is a spin-off from InfoServe. We're a 15-year-old research shop based out of Atlanta that's pioneered the utilization of prediction markets. CrowdMed was started by our founder, Jared Hyman, as a startup right now, and he's been successfully running it for about a year. And what I want to be able to do today is share with you a story, and I want to share with you two stories. The first story is about love between a brother and a sister, which really sparked the advent of CrowdMed and really brought it together. And then the second part of that story is, how do you actually take something that we utilize every day in our lives and adapt it to be able to satisfy a serious need that's out there? And at the risk of running a quote out here, which is probably the oldest one of everyone that gets thrown out in this conference, I quote Cicero, "In nothing do men more nearly approach the gods than in giving health to men." So helping others. So this is a shot of Jared Hyman, our owner, CEO, founder, and his sister, Carly. They grew up in Atlanta, pretty much a typical relationship with sibling rivalries. As they started to move into adulthood, they both became very close friends. However, what happened with Carly was, over time, what we found is that Carly's health started to degrade, that she was involved with clinical depression, that she was visiting a number of different physicians and specialists, and they were able to determine what the symptoms were, but they weren't able to determine what the cause was. So this very vibrant young woman had been reduced to almost a couch potato who really did not want to be able to leave her bed. And Jared was very concerned, quite obviously, about his sister. And he was very frustrated with the healthcare system that they weren't able to truly diagnose and truly treat his sister. And so, to a certain extent, he took what they told surgical residents at Johns Hopkins when they first start. And what they tell them is, the bleeding will stop. It's just a matter of when and how involved you get with that process. So he decided that the bleeding was going to stop for his sister, that he was going to work to be able to try and find a way to understand what was going on with Carly and how to be able to help her. So he did a lot of soul searching and understanding and researching and trying to figure out, what can I do to be able to help my sister that the medical professionals cannot do for her? InfoServe pioneered the use of prediction markets, in the U.S. with our patented process. So Jared was an astute reader of Cyril Ritke's book, The Wisdom of the Crowds, in which he espouses that you can use a diverse, and by diverse I mean non-targeted, group of individuals with perspective and knowledge, and they can be as accurate in their predictions of a future state as a targeted group of individuals can be. And he wondered, is there something there with his story of how individuals at a fair in ancient England predicted the weight of an ox, and how the American consumer, by the way they invested or didn't invest in Morton Thiokol after the Challenger disaster, and indicated that, it was the O-rings that caused the Challenger problem long before NASA ever figured it out. Was there something in here? Was there a way to be able to leverage the wisdom of the crowds to be able to help his sister? Okay. And he started to think about the experience that we'd had at InfoServe, his company, with prediction markets. And he started to think about some of the very diverse studies that we've done. And the one that we did for Mountain Dew, and I can share this because Pepsi didn't commission this study. So 3 years ago, Mountain Dew introduced 3 flankers, asked people to be able to go out, taste them, try them. They were in limited distribution for a very specified period of time, vote for them on social media to determine which one stayed in production. We went out the first day of availability and ran a prediction market. Screened people for perspective. You had to know something about carbonated soft drinks. Asked them to predict which one was going to sell the best. The difference between what we did is we did not have sensory. What Pepsi had was sensory because they put it in the marketplace. We predicted the exact same rank order and the same level of differential between them as what Nielsen reported 8 weeks post-test. And they had sensory data. So we thought of that and said, is there something here? And he also thought of the work that we did with the political primaries last year. And yeah, it was only 18 months ago we still had primaries out there and we didn't know who was going to be president. And so we went into and we did studies with prediction markets for Iowa, South Carolina, and Florida. We took people nationally and said, who do you think Iowans or South Carolinians or Floridians are going to vote for in the Republican primary? And we were as accurate as the in-state likely to voter polls were. So he said, okay, maybe there's something here. And maybe there's something with the work that we've done to be able to understand the overall strength of what's going on out there and letting people speak their minds and leveraging their individual wisdoms and their individual experiences and tweaking emotions and the experiences we've had within pharma and CPG and telecom and finance and on and on. Maybe there's a way we can leverage prediction markets to be able to help Carly. So now I'm going to introduce you to Stacy. And yes, I know I'm switching ladies. The reason is that Carly does not want everybody in the research community to know what was wrong with her. Stacy is a very real young woman. Stacy was 21 years old. Stacy was a fairly normal 21-year-old, except for a couple of things. One, she had mild depression. It had been haunting her for an extended period of time. And two, she had irregular menstrual cycles. And outside of a mild case of ADD, seasonal allergies, and having her tonsils pulled out when she was about 12, she was fairly normal, no major medical issues, etc. Now, from a family perspective, there was a genetic disorder called Fragile X syndrome that was in the family. It was recessive with her. She was a carrier. It was pre-mutant, the same as her mom, so it was not affecting her. Her brother was fully obsessed with it. It was fully expressed with him. He wasn't obsessed with it. It was fully expressed. I knew I'd get it out there eventually. So that was there in the family. Now, what had Stacy done? Well, Stacy had extensive experience with the medical profession. Stacy had visited about 18 different specialists over a period of time. Everyone from child psychologists to gynecologists to hypnotherapists. She'd even been to the Mayo Clinic. In over about a 2.5-year period, 970 days, no one had been able to diagnose what was going on with Stacy. All these experts determined what the symptoms were. They could not find out what was going on. So we decided to be able to try and leverage the wisdom of the crowds and to see if the crowd could help understand what was going on with Stacy. So this is the work that Jared was doing as a precursor to see, does this actually work? Can I help my sister Carly with this? So when we went out and we recruited several hundred individuals, we told them right up front that we're going to ask them to be able to leverage their individual knowledge and perspective to help diagnose a medical condition for an individual. We gave them the same information that I pretty much just gave you. Here's the person, here's what the symptoms are, here's what's going on with the family. What do you think? They were told that they could use virtually any resource they wanted to be able to come up with a diagnosis to understand what was going on with Stacy. You can go to WebMD, you can pull up Wikipedia, you can call your local family physician, you can do anything you want. Now, as an aside, a normal prediction market is about a 12 to 15 minute execution. With the exception of a handful of people, all of the folks that took this prediction market were in that 12 to 15 minute range. So if people went out to the internet to research this, they did it really damn fast. Either that or they just leveraged their own knowledge and their own information. Additionally, they were told that if they were correct in their prediction as to what Stacy's affliction was, that they could earn up to an additional $10 post-survey close, in addition to their usual e-rewards dollars that they get paid for taking the survey. That's giving them skin in the game. It's giving them an incentive. And we all know that from a survey perspective, as little as 50 cents or a dollar sometimes can really change individuals' behavior. So what did we find? These folks came back with a whole myriad of different things that they thought that Stacy was afflicted with. Everything from hypothyroid to depression to bipolar to manic depression. So we did some weighting and we looked through the data and we actually came up with 5 key issues that had been raised as potential ailments and afflictions for Stacy. So anxiety disorder, hypothyroid, Fragile X associated primary ovarian insufficiency, try and get that one out 7 o'clock in the morning, depression and premature menopause. So those were the 5 that percolated based on the investments and the activities within the prediction market is most likely to be Stacy's problem. So we ran a second market. And this time, as opposed to, we gave them the same background and the same information, but saying, what do you think it is? We said, what do you think, which one of these do you think it is? And asked them to be able to make their investments. And, okay, we gave them the incentives as we did with the first one. And lo and behold, they came back and they said it was FXPOI, Fragile X, primary ovarian insufficiency. And that was their recommendation and their diagnosis as to what was going on with Stacy. Stacy went to her OB-GYN, presented to him what the results were of this. The gyno did some research and essentially applied an estrogen patch to her. She's living a very normal life. The depression has gone away. The menstrual cycles are back to normal. Truly leveraged the wisdom of the crowds to be able to use a group of diverse individuals with perspective to be able to understand a difficult medical situation. And the same thing happened for Carly, Jared's sister. And although I can't share exactly what her diagnosis was, she found treatment based on leveraging the wisdom of the crowds. Of course, you go back to your medical professional and have them do the diagnosis and the confirmation. And here's a picture from 3 months ago when Carly was married. It's a radically different young lady than we saw that was sitting there curled up in a bed in a blanket. Okay. So as I said, this is kind of a two-pronged story. One, the story of love, you know, where Jared was trying to be more godlike, if you will, with a small g from Greek mythology, and trying to be able to help his fellow man or his sister in understanding what was going on with her. This is a startup for Jared. He does have seed money. He has conducted 20 tests right now using this exact same methodology. Is a 95% accuracy rate of the correct diagnosis being in the top 3 diagnoses put forth. It's a unique twist. It's a different innovation. It's a new way to be able to leverage prediction markets. It, to a certain extent, says, okay, well, you guys have had fun figuring out which Mountain Dew is going to sell. You know what Caesar should rebrand their new website. You understand who was going to win the presidential election. Here's a way to truly leverage what we do as researchers to help our fellow man. So thank you very much.
We'll take a couple of questions. Wait for the mic back here in the back right. Okay,
Would
first back there.
crowdsourcing experts, like doctors in this case, have produced better results?
How does the crowdsourcing of experts produce better results than going to doctors? Is the question.
I don't think it necessarily produces better results. I think what we've seen so far, and this is 9 months into its gestation, is that you're able to take a difficult to determine situation and understand what a potential solution could be and maybe open their eyes to it. I don't fully know where the commercialization is going to come, to be completely honest with you. I know what I charge a CPG company to go do a yogurt test. I can't see an individual paying that. So I don't know where the commercialization aspect comes. And by any means, we're not advocating that you go run a prediction market to be able to figure out why you're not feeling well in the morning as opposed to go to your health professional. He's proven 20 times now that it's got a 95% accuracy rate, so there's something there. And I know there's somebody here at this conference that's already approached me and said, I've got something that none of the doctors can figure out what it is. I want to do one of these things. So there's a place for it. I don't think there's a place in mainstream day in and day out medicine, but there's certainly a place for it.
There was another question over here.
Yes, my question is if you could just go into a little more detail about how you drilled down from when you had the plethora of various diagnoses down to 5. I just imagine myself, I'm given this dump of all these, ideas, and how did you take them down to 5?
Okay, within the confines of this type of analysis, there was a 2-step process in there. One was, what do you feel that the diagnosis is? What's the affliction? All right, so we have people put in hypothyroid, et cetera, et cetera. We take them through a second step, and we ask them then to be able to vote on the ideas that everybody else has put into that. So then you try to get more of a rank order of things, and you can actually start to weight some of the data. So a couple of things come out of it. One is based on the initial investment patterns and the initial diagnoses of folks, you get some sort of a weight average as to what it's worth. And then when you take those votes and you put it against it, you can allow those to percolate back up to the top. It's not as clean a delineation of concepts as when I'm evaluating some creative work, but it's getting back to the same point. Because those 5 that I put up there were all weighted. They percolated up based on either the number of mentions and or the thumbs up, thumbs down, the yes, no votes that we'll put behind each one.
We have another question over here.
This week we've been hearing a lot about Google surveys. That would be a more cost-effective way for individuals to do the same thing. Do you think that this crowdsourcing would work with a tool like that?
Crowdsourcing, my experience with crowdsourcing and working with prediction markets is that you really need a controlled panel. I mean, from my perspective, when I go to, and I'll just pick on 2 for now, the Research Nows and the GMIs of the world, who generally have a controlled, more of a controlled sample, they manage it, they run it. I receive much better quality, open-ended information coming back out of it than I do if I go out to a river sample. So I don't perceive necessarily a Google as being the right path right now. I've not tested them. I know I see a difference when I use a river sample versus when I use more of a controlled panel. And it depends on the quality of the client and the quality of the results that I need. Because yeah, there's numbers, there's quant stuff that percolates out of this, but the key learnings are also the open-end stuff. And I've found when you get to less than a purely maintained panel, you don't get what you're looking for.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.